Oh, hello there. Yes, well, that's cold, isn't it? Yeah. Yesterday, inevitably. Yeah, we had Nigel Farage, leader of a major political party, being attacked on a bus, which of course is very bad. Don't use violence, alright, okay? It's not a good idea, it's not a good look. But it did lead to this curious postings on Twitter, because you would have thought that somebody in Nigel Farage's position wouldn't simply decide to prejudice any potential police investigation. But sure enough, yesterday, very shortly after the incident, we get this. This is the individual who violently attacked me today. He has links to RMT and the Unison. Now, it does appear to be the same person as the videos that I've seen of Nigel Farage being attacked show. But at the same time, to basically point the finger very directly at an individual. Now, leads to the question, first of all, who gave Nigel Farage the name of this person? And secondly, what has somebody standing on basically what appears to be a picket line have to do with anything? Because that's perfectly legal behaviour. So, obviously, it led to a pile-on, right? Leaving that one just hanging in the air. You get turning point. How many railway workers actually support the actions of the far-left RMT? Which is the usual thing you get from Turning Point, because they don't actually understand how unions work. Yes, they're democratic organisations, Turning Point. They don't exist merely to exert pressure using dodgy American money. Might want to think about that briefly. Or not, as the case may be. The RMT is using hard-working Brits' money to fund extremism, which is one of those brilliant irony-free zones that I absolutely adore from such organisations. Anyway, Richard Tice himself decided to join in on the action, and as ever, right, do the RMT and Unison condemn such violence, he said. Well, yeah, which leads us into a whole new territory as to what people should condemn. Don't forget that anyone that is left-wing or Palestinian or in any way, shape or form a sort of a viable journalist always has to condemn Hamas and any form of Muslim violence. So presumably on this basis, I would suggest to Richard Tice that the British people, because I'm presuming this guy's a British citizen, the British people need to condemn this, okay? But you'll notice the notion of extremism with somebody actually doing something that's perfectly legal, which leads us very neatly on, oddly enough, to a very curious exchange yesterday with Posey Parker, everybody's favourite ultra, who got in on the action to a certain extent, okay, with that usual kind of thing whereby anybody that we don't like is an extremist, okay? I often get accused of that because I call people that are fascists. Often people that are fascists, it's the same way when I call people racists. It's often because, in my weirdly warped sense of the world, them being racists makes them a racist. Anyway, yeah, we get this from her, okay? The far left is fascistic, violent, lawless, authoritarian, and destructive. Well, okay, right, okay, so I don't see how the far left can be fascistic other than if you kind of twist the notion of what being a fascist is. You can call them authoritarian, fine, but then can they be lawless and authoritarian at the same time? It's one of those things I find it hard to get my head around, that one, okay? It falls into that kind of category you get sometimes of the idea of very well organised anarchists who presumably go around stirring up apathy. It's one of those kind of phrases that doesn't quite work. Violent and destructive, okay, fine, yes. They must be recognised as domestic terrorists and stopped. Okay then, but of course what Kelly is doing here is she means anybody that doesn't agree with her should be labelled as a terrorist, which might well mean, as I keep saying, it might well mean sort of having to build a lot of camps in Dorset. house the tens of thousands of people like me that just don't agree with her. She then sort of like carried on in the series of tweets in the thread. So we get, somebody said to her, well, Tony Benn certainly wasn't any of these, because they put up a Tony Benn quote, and she says, or far left. So what she means is people like me, presumably, who are on that kind of Bennite, what used to be called the Bennite wing of the left, are acceptable, even though I don't agree with her. Now, does that make me fascistic, authoritarian, and lawless? Because I'm not really violent, mostly. Anyway, yeah, and then it carried on. Okay, so she kind of doubled down on this, which I thought I'll just share with you. The far left is anarchism, which is the abolition of hierarchical government and the organisation of society on a voluntary, cooperative basis. It's the complete opposite of fascism. How do people not know this? Yes, thanks, Liam Gill. Yeah, indeed. To which she said, there's nothing voluntary about the authoritarians who call themselves far left. They're revolting. So now we have people calling themselves far left, but they're not actually far left. In fact, they are far right, which leads us into that whole kind of thing where you get with people like Turning Point, whereby the anti-fascists are actually the fascists, which is one of those kind of weirdly Orwellian phrases that actually makes me smile every time I hear it. And you can think to yourself, yes, that is the way the world works. Other people said, same as the far right then, why omit them? And Kelly Jane inevitably says, because I'm talking about the far left. Yes, indeed, you see, people that basically, broadly speaking, will buy her clothing are nice people, even if they hold incredibly obnoxious opinions. And talking of incredibly obnoxious opinions, I do have to mention this from yesterday, because we had a report in the Daily Mail saying that public support for transgender people's ability to change sex on their birth certificate collapses compared to recent years' major study finds. And yeah, when you say just 24% now think trans should be allowed to change sex if they want, okay, that's not particularly a collapse. It's not a sort of Conservative Party collapse. But I would point out to anyone out there, like the Daily Mail, that oddly, after years of unrelenting propaganda aimed at the general public, we've now arrived at the situation whereby that propaganda has paid off, perhaps inevitably. This is the reason why people own newspapers, and this is the reason why people like Kelly J. Keane and Nigel Farage and Richard Tice and Turning Point and other people I'm about to come on to are so dangerous, because they're allowed to feed this stuff into the public discourse, which does actually lead to violence in its own right. But that's kind of okay, because it's the right people who are having violence meted about them. The dangerous ones, the far left ones, the extremists, the lawless authoritarians, yes, the well-organised anarchists, all of those people. And they basically deserve it, don't they? But the good news yesterday about the wonderful people on the right, shall we say, the right side of history, inevitably, was the news that Glinner is going to appear at the ADF conference in Ireland. And you can look up this stuff. I can leave you some links down below. But Glinner, you know, that great friend of gay people, that great friend of women, that great fighter for gay and women's rights, is going to an anti-abortion, anti-gay conference. I imagine they're paying. Yes, what a principled man he is. A man who, after all, is the victim in all of this. And, you know, it's not his job now just to be a bigot. Or is it? Yes, there he is with Calvin and Andy No. Yes, proud boys that they are. Good, God-fearing people who only have their own best interests at heart. Ooh. Anyway, on a light-hearted note, because, again, this did catch my eye, we now have a new unit of weight to go with all of those other ones. You know, countries the size, areas of forest the size of Wales, or intestines that will stretch around a tennis court. We now have catapult shots as heavy as a panda. Yes, and you have to say to yourself, I'm not quite sure how heavy a panda is. I imagine it's quite heavy. Why don't they just say big balls of rock. I don't know. Anyway, that was from the Times, which did make me smile. Yes, it's the new unit of weight. Yes, yes. I know I've put on some weight, but I'm actually only a quarter of a pounder, so it's fine. It's fine. Anyway, do have a lovely rest of the day. And yes, if you are going to be violent, make sure that you condemn yourself beforehand. And if you are going to be violent, make sure it's meted out to the right people, not the wrong people, because that will make you an extremist, obviously. Do enjoy.